Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today I am going to be bleeding the brakes and the clutch in my 2002 ZRX1200R. And these are pretty straightforward jobs. They're really the same on most motorcycles, very similar principles. And you know, just a couple of things before we get started here. Brake fluid eats paint. So if you have to put a towel over your tank, whatever, it's a good idea to do that. If you're not a very clean person to begin with, I'd suggest just staying away from brake fluid and doing the brakes on a bike. Even if some spurts on your fender and you didn't see it, it will eat the paint. So just a word of warning there. Another word of warning here: you have to keep some kind of cover over this as you're bleeding them, because when you do this, it can shoot up a little stream of brake fluid when you're actually bleeding the brakes, if you've got the top of this off. And again, that can go on your paint, it can get in your controls, it can get all over the place. Same thing goes for the clutch, and you don't really have to worry about that with the rear reservoir here. It doesn't really shoot brake fluid up, so that's not a big deal. But you just want to be extra careful. You're working with caustic stuff. I would suggest wearing gloves. And then two, the brakes are a critical safety component of your motorcycle. Next to the tires, they are the second most important feature of safety on the bike. And so if you don't do this job thoroughly, if you don't do it properly, you can end up, it can end up a crash or a fatal crash. And we certainly don't want that. So just some words of warning before you get into this job. If this is your first time through, I would suggest doing this job with someone who has done it before and is a competent mechanic. So with those caveats, let's get into it. We'll go ahead and get going on this job. All right, let's get to work. On to the rear brakes here. I've removed the side cover that is just above the brake reservoir to give me more access to the brake reservoir. And to do that, I actually had to pull two 10mm bolts out of the back of the gas tank. Once those are removed, I can lift the gas tank up. And there's a side cover that went here. And I had to use a JIS screwdriver. If you're not familiar with that, it looks like a Phillips head screwdriver. And remove the bolt here. And then there are two tabs that hold the side cover in place. Just pop the side cover out and then lifted the gas tank up to kind of get the side cover out. So that was done first. That's already done. I've got my cap loose here. What I'm going to do first is empty the old brake fluid out of here, because there's no reason to put this down through the system if we can just remove it first. In order to do that, I have a syringe with a long tube on it. This tube, we'll actually use this syringe as well to bleed the brakes. But I'm going to just suck out the fluid, the old brake fluid that is in the reservoir with a syringe. I've got a waste container there for brake fluid. It's just an old brake fluid container. There's a new container of the .4 brake fluid that is clean, ready to go. I'm also going to need a 10mm open end for the bleeder valve, which is here on the piston on the rear brake. And I'm going to put the camera on the tripod here while I'm doing this, and I'll put it in time lapse. Let's get to work. to bleed out the front brakes, it is the same procedure. We're going to use the syringe to suck out the old fluid that's up here. We'll dispose of that. We'll replace the fluid that's in here with brand new fluid. And then we are going to come down here and use the tube end and place it on the bleeder valve, which is right here. And we're going to, the procedure is you put pressure on the brakes, on the brake lever, and then you crack the bleeder valve. And then you close the bleeder valve, and then you release the brake lever. If you don't do that, it's just going to suck whatever you just got out of it right back into your calipers and your pistons. And you don't want to do that. So again, the sequence is you put pressure on the brake lever. And then while holding pressure, you crack the bleeder, and then you close the bleeder. And only then do you release this pressure, and that causes the fluid to go down through your lines. It forces any air up out of your bleeder valve here that is down in your pistons, and that's the proper way to do it. All right, we have finished bleeding the brakes out. That went painlessly. Next thing we're going to do is bleed out the clutch. And this is a hydraulic clutch on this bike, so it's the same exact procedure that you do for bleeding the brakes. And the clutch slave cylinder, the clutch bleeder valve is underneath this cover, so we're going to remove that. It's two 8mm bolts there that hold it on. I'll remove that first. We'll also remove the cap here, and then we'll do the same thing. We're going to suction all the old fluid out of here, dispose of that, put new fluid in it, and then we're going to just get the new fluid going down through the system and flush it out. It's the same exact procedure for a hydraulic clutch as it is for hydraulic brakes. All right, I just got back from a test drive and everything functions exactly like it should. So I'm just very happy about that. I'm going to do a final look over here for any leaks or drips. Everything looks good. That looks good. Yep. So that is how to bleed the brakes on a ZRX. I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, enjoy the ride.